All right, everyone, welcome. Welcome to the Monday night class. This is our class, the week of Purim. Maybe it will connect us all to Purim. I'm still a little bit behind. I was out last week, and this is a class that was really sitting in my head already from a week and a half ago. But because I was traveling, I didn't get a chance to share this. Phenomenal ideas about something that pertains to the Jewish people right now. Big news, big news, big news. And it's still early enough for everybody to hop on. What am I referring to? There is a custom, not a custom, there is a takana, there is an institution that was instituted by the Lubavitcher Rebbe that we should study halacha, chapters of law of Maimonides, of the book of Maimonides, every single day. And through that, one can cover the entire book of Maimonides, which really represents the entire Torah Shabbal Peh, the entire oral law. It's the only book that you can really learn, and you can cover the entire oral law, because that God gave to Moshe. God gave to Moshe the written Torah. He handed him first the 10 Commandments written on the luchot, on the tablets, and then over the 40-year period, or really over the first year that Moses was in heaven, the first 40 days that Moses was in heaven, Hashem taught Moshe Rabbeinu all the mitzvot. And then eventually, by the completion of the 40 years, Moshe had written down the entire Torah. That's the written Torah. But then there is the oral law. And the oral law was handed down for many generations only as an oral tradition. Although people did take notes and write individual, jot things down for themselves for their own memory, but things were not written down in a published or in a formal manner. And then, but this makes up the teachings of how exactly we have to keep the mitzvot. Without the oral law, we don't know at all how to keep the mitzvot, how to keep all the commandments, how to live a Jewish life, and so on and so forth. So the Torah is not applicable really to the world without Torah Shabbal Peh, without the oral law. And it was passed on from generation to generation. Moshe was the one who received it, handed it to Joshua to the next generation. Next generation, as discussed in the beginning of Ethics of the Fathers, the whole chain-like progression of how the Torah was handed down. Then came the Mishnah, the Talmud, and so on and so forth. In all those books, when one studies the Mishnah and then studies the Talmud, you kind of get a inkling on. You go through all the aspects of the oral Torah, of the commentary, so to speak, on the Torah that was given by God to Moshe, plus all this that the rabbis have expounded on based on the methods that Hashem taught Moshe Rabbeinu how to expound on the Torah. But it's still very, very fragmented. Things are all over the place. So in order to be able to get a very clear understanding of the entire law, you might call it the law of Moses, not just the commandments as they're in the written Torah, because over there they're not, in any case, they're not applicable yet to daily living. And it's only through the law that is given through the oral law that we get an understanding of it, as mentioned earlier. So we don't have any book, so to speak, that gives us a concise understanding of every mitzvah with all of its details, so that we can say we study the entire Torah Shabbal Peh, the entire oral law. Until Maimonides came along, Moshe ben Maimon, Hasfardi from Spain, and he lived about 1,000 years ago, and he took upon himself to go through the entire Talmud and comb his way through all the details and sub-details, and he did an extraordinary, almost impossible type of a work that Maimonides did. And he codified all of the Torah and gave us one book, and he said, you read this book and you have the entire law of Moses, the entire Torah Shabbal Peh is all at your fingertips. Now, we don't always follow the halachic opinion of Maimonides, because Maimonides had to study it himself, the Talmud, And a lot of times there are contradictions and there are questions and there are certain things that are left unanswered. And you got to use, reasoning and other methods to come to a concrete, conclusive decision on how one is to apply the law. And sometimes you have variations, different rabbis, and so on and so forth. We don't always follow Rambam's opinion. So when it comes, you can't study Rambam and that should be your rabbi, because and again, it depends also Ashkenazic Jewry, Sephardic Jewry, but whatever it is. So halachically, we don't follow Rambam. So we have to study what we call the Shulchan Aruch, which was written much later. But the Shulchan Aruch is based on much of it, and the entire structure of it is based on Maimonides and some other great rabbis. But again, Maimonides still remains unique as the only one who tackled the entire Torah and gave us a book that covers from A to Z every element of Torah. Because, however, Rambam is not final halacha, we don't find that people studied Rambam independently. Rambam was always something that people learned when you learned certain passages of Talmud, or when you studied Talmud. The main occupation of people was the study of Talmud, and Maimonides was one of the ways of one of the methods or one of the elements of learning when you learn Rambam, and it gave you clarity on how to understand a certain passage of the Talmud. So it was mainly part of yeshiva learning, and there wasn't no systematic study of Rambam. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, 40 years ago, instituted this idea that we should study the Rambam, and he gave it as a gift to the Jewish people. He said that this should be something studied by all of the Jewish people so that we all unify together and study the same study every day. So with the Rebbe, it served two purposes. First of all, it would get Jews to become knowledgeable in all of the Torah. Secondly, and it's a mitzvah for us to know all of the Torah. Secondly, it would also unify the Jewish people in one learning, because people would all study the same subject. Because the Rebbe picked a day that it would start, and then every day thereafter we study. And the Rebbe instructed us to do that, to try to finish Maimonides in 1 year. In order to finish Maimonides in a 1-year cycle, it takes study 3 chapters of the book of the Mishnah Torah, which is again the book of Maimonides. It's called the Mishnah Torah. Mishnah Torah means the repetition of the Torah. It's it's taken from the book of Deuteronomy that's also called Mishnah Torah. So this is so when you study 3 chapters a day, you finish Maimonides in a little less. You finish the entire book in a little less than a year. We'll see soon about that. And then you start over again. It's a yearly study. The Rebbe, however, said that he understands that taking on 3 chapters Maimonides every single day could be quite a task, especially for people that are not that comfortable and not that learning and studying, doesn't come so at ease. So the Rebbe gave an easier route for those who cannot do it and said, do 1 chapter a day and it'll take you 3 years to complete. Oh, fine. So why am I talking about this right now? Because 2 weeks ago, we're already 2 weeks into this, on the Rosh Chodesh Adar, less than 2 weeks ago, today is the 10 days ago, on Rosh Chodesh Adar, on Friday, the first day of Rosh Chodesh Adar, we completed, the Rambam study was completed for the 44th cycle, and we started the 45th cycle. Even though the Rebbe instituted it 40 years ago, we're already doing 45 cycles, because to finish Maimonides, to finish the book, takes a little less than a year. It's about 15 days less than a year. 300, to be exact, 339 days is the cycle of Rambam study. And now it's 45. So we started the 45th one. So, okay, we do this yearly. What's the big deal? The big deal is that this is so Moshiach that I'm so excited about it. And therefore, I would recommend that those of you who don't study Maimonides and don't join this is a good time to hop on board, because this time around has an incredible power, incredible power. And it will do a lot of good for each and every one of you who takes upon themselves to study the Rambam. And if you can't join on the full cycle, meaning to do 3 chapters a day, to study it even 1 chapter a day, you're still connecting to this unique energy that's flowing in the world right now. In other words, a lot of times over here at this class, we talk about current events, which are more the external elements of what's going on. And what I want to talk about today is the internal dynamics that are really what's moving and shaking everything that's going on in the world. And that is that we have arrived this year, particularly to the 45th study of Maimonides, of the entire Torah. But to understand that, we'll have to unpack it. Why is 45 so significant and so great? And what does it have to do with this year particularly? What's its connection to the Geula, to the redemption, to Moshiach, and so on and so forth? Because every class we do is always connected to the redemption. The first thing, and which immediately is going to make the connection on the big way, is that 45 is Gematria Geula. How do you like that? Numeric value of the word Geula, which means redemption, is 45. The Lubavitcher Rebbe instituted that we do Rambam, and everything the Rebbe did was in preparation for the redemption. The Rebbe's ambition, the Rebbe's drive was all about bringing the redemption. So everything that he did, sending out his emissaries to the 4 corners of the earth, reaching out to every Jew to do mitzvahs, and so on and so forth, underneath it all was a burning passion to hasten the redemption. And not only that, but to prepare the Jewish people and to prepare the entire world for the ultimate redemption. So the study of Maimonides is also directly involved in preparing for the redemption. So it's to be understood that when we reach the 45th round, which 45 is the numeric value of Geula, we are to appreciate that the study of Maimonides this time around probably equals and far surpasses all the 44 cycles all combined. Meaning the potent, the dimension, the power of this study that we're studying right now equals and surpasses beyond and beyond the 44 cycles. Of course, I'm saying this on my own, meaning the Rebbe didn't tell me this, but this is my hunch, if you might say. This is my intuition, and I'll share with you the reasons why, and then you'll decide if you're with me on that. And maybe you'll be inspired to join along and tap this incredible Geula energy of the 45th cycle of Rambam. So first of all, let's share something really, really awesome. And that is that something I didn't know till just a few weeks ago. Someone shared it, and I was blown away by it. You see, going back to Sinai, as I mentioned earlier, Moshe was the one who was given the Torah, and Moshe was taught the Torah to the Jewish people during the 40 years. Okay, 40 years we spent with Moses in the desert, and we studied Torah. However, most of the Torah that we studied during the 40 years was the details and reviewing and really, getting a full grip on it. The actual transmission of the Torah happened at Sinai. After Sinai, there's nothing really new. It's just unpacking what's there. So we might say that at Sinai, they got all the principles, and then they were like detailing it as they studied and learned and understood it better, and so on and so on. How do we know that? Because we know that all the mitzvot were given at Sinai. Meaning not only the 10 commandments were given at Sinai. Rashi says it in the beginning of Parshas Bahar. Rashi asks, "Ma'anya Shemitah Eitzel Har Sinai." What does it mention by the mitzvah of the sabbatical year? It mentions Bahar Sinai at Mount Sinai. So Rashi says is to teach us that just like Shemitah, the laws of sabbatical, the general principles and the details were given at Sinai, so to the rest of the Torah, everything was given at Sinai. So then what happened all the other 40 years when they were 39 years when they left Sinai, when they left Har Sinai? It must be they were reviewing it and understanding it deeper. But the initial transmission was in the first year. Was everything on the mountain during the 40 days? Or maybe it was, it seems like, it says in today's Chumash, it says Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu, at the end of the 40 years, he taught him, at the end of the 40 days that Moshe was in the heaven, Hashem gave him the Torah. And Rashi says he couldn't possibly learn the entire thing in 40 days, but God gifted him with the knowledge. He downloaded, he gave him I don't know how they call it, a quick, I don't know what they call it, an expedited lesson in which he increased Moshe's ability to receive. He received the entire Torah in that 40 days. And perhaps we also know that God spoke to Moshe, kept on speaking to Moshe when they built the Oel Moed, when they put up the tabernacle. God was speaking to Moshe, teaching mitzvahs. I'm not exactly sure how much came to him in the first 40 days. But again, the main point that I'm trying to bring out is that the entire Torah was transmitted and taught to the Jewish people when the Jewish people were standing at the foot at Sinai. Now, we used to think that the whole story of Sinai was just a couple of days. They came to the mountain, God came down, spoke, and gave them the 10 commandments, and that's it. Finito. But it's not true. The Jewish people were at Sinai for quite a long time. How long were they at Sinai? So the verse says in the book of Numbers, in the third portion of the book of Numbers called Parshas Baloscha, it gives an exact date when they traveled away from Har Sinai. It says it was on the 20th day of the second month. Second month in the Torah over here is referring to the month of Iyar. So Chaf Iyar, which means the 20th day of the month of Iyar, is when the Jewish people left Sinai. Therefore, Rashi says, this teaches us that the Jewish people spent camped in the area of Sinai, next to the mountain, for 1 year minus 10 days. Because they arrived there on the first day of the third month. What's the third month? The month of Sivan. Hebrew month, first month is the month of, third month is the month of Sivan. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. So Aleph, Sivan, the first day of Sivan, they arrived to the mountain. Aleph, Sivan, the next year, would have been the first anniversary of them being at that mountain. But they left 10 days earlier. They left the 20th day of the month of Iyar, which is 10 days before the third month, 20 days into the second month before they reached the third month. So they were there for a year minus 10 days. Now, in the Hebrew calendar is a solar calendar. I'm sorry, not a solar, is a lunar calendar. Since it's a lunar calendar, the lunar calendar is 354 days. So 354 minus 10 is 344 days. So how many days did the Jews spend at Sinai? 344. Right? Good. But how many days were they studying Torah at Sinai? Well, the first day they came was before the Torah was given. That was on Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Actually, it says God didn't even speak to them. Moshe didn't even talk to them. It was a quiet day. They came, and because they were tired, nothing was spoken to them on the first day. Rosh Chodesh, nothing. And the next day, which might have been on a Monday, but the second day of Sivan, the third day of Sivan, the fourth day of Sivan, and the fifth day of Sivan, the preparations were being done for the Torah to be given. Moshe begins to shuffle between God and Israel. He's being the marriage broker. He's trying to get an understanding between the two parties. And then God instructs them to prepare for 3 days. And on the third day, God will come down on the mountain. So we know the day that God came down on the mountain, the first Torah lesson that was taught, the first Torah lesson was taught directly by God, was on the 6th day of Sivan. That's when we commemorate Shavuot, the day of the giving of the Torah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, they did not study Torah, because it was before the Torah was given. When did they start learning Torah? The first lesson with God, the 10 Commandments. And then they continued studying the entire year till they left. Now, of course, there was a little bit of a break then, because Moses went up to the mountain and Moshe wasn't there to teach them. And then they made the golden calf, and then Moshe had to go up to heaven again for 40 days. And then God sent them down to go bring new tablets, and he went up for another 40 days. So ultimately, Moshe spent in heaven close to 120 days. So those 120 days, one can argue that they weren't really studying Torah, because there was no lesson, there was no teacher. But to me, it sounds it's very hard to accept that. What were they doing for 120 days? Okay, they had to do repentance and so on and so forth. But to me, it's clear that they were studying the 10 Commandments that they had given. You know what kind of revelation that was? They saw everything, so they were absorbing it. So there was Torah study even during those 120 days. And obviously, after Moshe comes down, after Yom Kippur, he continues teaching them till the 20th day of Iyar, and then they left. So if you think about that, from the 6th day of Sivan until the 20th day of Iyar is exactly 339 days. Well, that's exactly the same amount of time of the Mishnah Torah cycle that Rambam, the Rebbe, instituted, that we study the Rambam, which means to study the entire Torah yearly. It's 339 days. So that is really, really cool. It's really the first time we study the entire Torah was in 339 days. And then we do a repetition we merited right before Moshiach comes to go back to that Sinai experience of learning the entire Torah from Moshe. This time it's not Moshe ben Amram, who was Moses. It's Moshe ben Maimon, who is Maimonides, who's really teaching us Moshe's Torah. It's the same name, Moshe. And we know that there was a phrase that the great rabbis in the days of Maimonides said, and this has become kind of an accepted truth. It is a truth, so it's something that has been accepted. They said about Maimonides that Moshe ad Moshe loikam kemoshe. From Moses until Moses, there was no one like Moses. From Moshe to Moshe, no one ever was Moshe, like Moshe. That means that the great rabbis put Maimonides on the pedestal equal to the great Moshe Rabbeinu. And I saw this amazing story. I repeated it the other day by the Kiddush over here, that it's brought in Seder Hadoros, which is a book written by, I don't know who. I once knew his name. I forgot already. He was a very great rabbi who compiled the history and of basically of the world, the history of. It's a Jewish book on Judaic history. And over there he goes through all the various different rabbis and the books that they've made and so on and so forth. So when it comes to the Rambam, he brings the story as follows. He says that when the Maimonides wrote the book of Mishnah Torah, he kind of secluded himself for 10 years. Because it was such a monumental work, it took him 10 years to write the book. And he didn't want to be bothered at all. He was kind of in seclusion for 10 years. At the end of the 10 years, he had a dream. When he completed the book, he had a dream. And in the dream, his father Maimon appeared to him. His father had already been passed on to the other world. His father appeared to him, and he brought along with him someone very distinguished looking. And he asked him, and Maimonides said, "Who's this?" And he said, "I brought you Moshe Rabbeinu. I brought Moses." Now let's understand something. Moses lived, 2,000 years before Maimonides? Or a little more, 2,200 years before Maimonides. So Rambam's father in paradise, in Gan Eden, somehow he manages to meet Moshe, and Moshe comes to check out. And he says to his son in the dream, Moshe wants to see your work. So the Rambam takes his manuscripts that he just finished, in which again he had gathered together the entire Torah Shebaal Peh. He shows it to Moses. Moses leafs through it and approves of it and says, "Thank you very much." Or the words he uses over there, Yasher Koach, which is a way of saying thank you. May your strength become whatever. Yasher Koach means gratitude to you. Moses was very happy. Moshe was very happy for what Rambam did. So from Rambam, now there is now interesting on Rambam's by his gravesite, on his tombstone, it's written the phrase, "From Moshe to Moshe there was none like Moshe." That means in these 2,000 years, there was no rabbi who can kind of be equal to Moshe. There's another very interesting line that is written over there. In one of the Rambam's Maimonides books, now the Mishnah Torah is not the only book of Maimonides. Maimonides wrote many other books. One of the famous ones is Moreh Nevuchim. Moreh Nevuchim means the Guide to the Perplexed, a great philosophical book where he deals about the fundamentals of Jewish theology and ideas. Then there is his Pirush HaMishnah. He wrote an entire commentary on the Mishnah. And he wrote many other letters, a lot from Maimonides. And in one of his writings, I think it's in the Pirush HaMishnah, in his commentary on the Mishnah, the Rambam writes about Moshe. When he describes Moshe, he says about him, he is mifchar min ha'anushi. That Moses, he is the chosen of the human race. Mivchar min ha'anushi. He is the most chosen. That means the highest human being ever to live was Moses. Okay, obviously, closest to God, received the Torah, the greatest prophet of all time is Moses. That very same phrase they put on the Rambam's tombstone as well, that he was mifchar min anishi, the chosen of the human race. So here we see a lot of connection. So going back to what we said earlier, Moses taught the Torah to the Jewish people in the original run, if you might say. The original run needed to be done at Sinai was over a period of 339 days. Our study of Maimonides yearly that the Lubavitcher Rebbe instituted, again, takes 339 days. Now, was this intentional? Did the Rebbe think and do this intentional? I don't know. But by divine providence, this is what came out. So it's really neat, especially taking into consideration of how it actually comes out to 339 days. The way it works out is not so simple, because the book of Rambam itself has 1,000 chapters, which is also, you see, by divine providence, a perfect 1,000 chapters. 1,000 chapters. Not 1,001, not 999. And with this, he covers in 14 books. The book of Mishnah Torah has 14 books. Each book has sections, and the sections have chapters. And when you cover from the beginning to end, 1,000. Well, the Rebbe says we should do 3 chapters a day. If you take 1,000 and divide it by 3, you get 333. 333. So really, in 333 days, we should cover all of the Rambam. But we said it takes 339 days. It's another 6 days. Why? One day we do the introduction. One day we do the positive mitzvahs. In the beginning, the Rambam counts all the mitzvot. So one day we spend doing the positive mitzvahs. One day we spend doing the prohibitive mitzvahs. One day we do the positive and the prohibitive mitzvahs together in order of how they are match up with the laws of Maimonides. Rambam declares which mitzvot he's going to explain in each section of his book. So that's another day. That's 4 days. And 2 days we spend doing the Rambam's Nusach HaTfilah. Now part of the chapters. Nusach HaTfilah means the liturgy of the prayer book. In the back of one of the books, the Rambam adds and tells us how we pray, and that takes 2 days. So you get from 333, 334, 35, 36, 37, 38. It's 6 days. So it comes out, it came out so amazingly, the way the Rebbe divided it, that it's 339 days. It matches exactly the 339 days that Moshe has the Jewish people at Sinai, in which the entire Torah was transmitted the first time. Now, why is the Rebbe the one that institutes this? Again, just some of my thoughts. It's because there is Moshe Rabbeinu, that's Moses received the Torah. There is Rambam, kind of in the middle of history, a little bit. And then there is Moshiach. And we know that Moshiach and Moshe is the same soul. One of the things we find that the Rebbe would always say, which is really interesting, the Lubavitcher Rebbe would always say that he would refer to his father-in-law as the Moshe of the generation. The previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, the Rebbe would always call him the Moshe of the generation. Where does the Rebbe come up with that idea? It has to do with the statement of the Zohar. The Zohar says that in the Ishpashtusa de Moshe b'chol dara v'dara. It's a quote from the Zohar, that there is an expansion of Moshe's neshama into every generation. The leaders of every generation have a spark of Moshe's soul. Now that's true about every generation. But then I once shared in this a Zohar, I don't know right now off the cuff where it is, but it is a passage in the Zohar where it says explicitly that particularly the last generation of exile, Moshe is going to come back in a literal sense and be with the Jewish people. The Zohar says it has to do with the word Moshe. Moshe stands for Masha Haya, what was, Hu Shegiya, that will be. It also fits with what the Midrash says, Goel Rishon, Hu Goel Acharon. The first Redeemer is the last Redeemer. Moshe will come back to redeem the Jewish people. That does not mean Moshe in the physical. Moshe in the physical will be resurrected, probably right at the beginning of the redemption. Because how do we know that? Because the Talmud says on many questions, when the Talmud says, how are we going to do this when Mashiach comes? What's going to be the law? And the Medrash says, what's the problem? And the Talmud says, what's the problem? Moshe is going to be there. We'll ask Moshe. The fact so from there we see that Moshe is going to be, even though generally the resurrection is supposed to happen 40 years after the temple is built, after the revelation of Mashiach. However, certain tzaddikim will get up immediately. So Moshe will be there. Moshe va'Aaron imohem, the sages say. Moshe and Aaron. These two brothers will be there very fast. We can ask them. So that's Moshe in the physical. But Moshe in the spiritual, his soul is embedded in Mashiach's soul. So hold on one second. If he's embedded in Mashiach, how will he also be resurrected? Well, we once discussed a very phenomenal, amazing thing, that when a person's neshama is going to come back after Mashiach comes, every incarnation of that person is going to come back. So you will have people who are really the same you, you as you were 100 years ago, maybe, you as you lived a lifetime 300 years ago, you as you lived 500 years ago, you'll be able to see yourself in every incarnation. Probably we will know each other. We will know our very incarnations throughout all the generations. Because every incarnation, many bodies can live off one soul, for however that explanation is. So it shouldn't be a problem that the Moshe from back then can be alive, and at the same time, Moshe and Moshiach's neshama are intertwined and unified. So I have a hunch. This has been my hunch I'm doing a lot of hunches today, but again, these are just my thoughts. That the Lubavitcher Rebbe, being that he's the one who's taking us out of exile to the redemption, so I have the hunch that he literally is Moshe, but I have proofs that he is Moshe. Because two things about Moshe, two little things. There's probably much more to say about this. But one of the things is that Moshe was, first of all, I'll say three things. How did God test Moshe if Moshe was worthy to redeem the Jewish people? So it says that God chose Moshe, he made him be a shepherd. And God was watching how he is tending the flock. And one day there was one sheep, one little a goat or a sheep, who ran off from the flock, and Moshe went chasing after it, I think, for days. And because he finally caught up with it, and he didn't yell at it, and he didn't beat it, he picked it up so with tender love, and he brought it back in, and he said, you probably were hungry, you probably were tired, or whatever it is. And he tended, and God says, well, if you care so much about each sheep, you're the one who's going to lead my people. We find this week in the Torah portion, Parshas Kisisa, after the golden calf, we see the exceptional love that Moshe has for the Jewish people, that even for sinners, he's willing to say to God, erase me from the Torah, delete me from existence if you don't forgive even the sinners of the sinners. And so we found in our generation that our generation merited to have a leader who chases after every lost Jew. In the history, we haven't had a Jewish leader who literally chases after every single Jew to the four corners of the world. This is the Rebbe. I mean, of course, they are the rabbis, the Chabad rabbis across the world, but they're all doing it as agents of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's their inspiration. He's the one who directed them to forsake the comforts of Jewish communities all over the world. Just a little shout out. I'm traveling now to Fairbanks, Alaska, because my son had, Baruch Hashem, a baby boy, and he's going to make the circumcision is going to be the day before Purim. But it's not easy. It's much easier if you have a baby over here in Los Angeles. He could have lived over here than in Fairbanks, Alaska. You don't even have a mohel. You have to fly out a mohel, and the mohel is the one who does the circumcision. Now you have to know, and he was busy today. I had this. You have to take the baby. So usually a mohel comes to look at the baby to see if the baby can have. Usually the mohel can tell if the baby's a little yellow. We don't do the bris right away. We wait. We push it off. So the mohel comes to check. But what happens if you are in far away and the mohel is only going to fly out, but he can't fly out to check? So you have to take a Billy Rubin test. So my son went to the baby with the Billy Rubin test, and they said that the baby was crying a lot, and they truly got the blood and the whatever. And then they told, after waiting a long time, they said that the test didn't come out good. He has to come back tomorrow. So I said, no, this is one of the challenges of shlichus. If you would be living in a nice Jewish comfort or Jewish community, no problem. There's enough mohels over here who can do the circumcision. We have to fly someone out who's going to go there, plus all the other hardships. That's just the beginning of a hardship. Then you have to educate your children. You don't even have schools, Jewish schools. You have to use, and today's days at least, we have online schooling. And just for many years, the shluchim would go out and they would have to teach their own children. Very, very difficult. It comes with enormous hardship. Yet, all these young men and women, or not sometimes not so young men and women, are so driven and so inspired to reach every lost Jew. Like I say about my son, he's reaching all the Jews that are frozen in the ice in the farthest northern remote areas And he's reaching them. He's warming them up. He's taking them out of the snow. They're coming. They're excited that he's there. They're connecting to their Judaism. They have not connected for years. They're connecting. And he's just a personal example, but all over the world. That's because the Rebbe, that's Moshe. Moshe cares for it's Moshe's neshama to care for every Jew. So that's one indication. Second indication is Moshe is the one who brought the Jewish people the commandments. The first one who taught us about tefillin was Moshe. The first one who taught us about matzah, eating matzah, is Moshe. He brought us all the 613 commandments. So we would think that although all the Jewish people and all the Jewish rabbis care so much about those mitzvot, but we would think that Moshe Rabbeinu's level of care for the mitzvot is off the charts because he is the one who heard it from God and he is the one who's bringing it to the people. So he cares that these mitzvot should be performed. I don't think since the days of Moshe Rabbeinu there was ever a person who cared about a Jew doing a mitzvah like the Rebbe. And this is not something we can argue about. We can say, proof is in the pudding. There's no other person who has so many mitzvahs being done because of him like the Rebbe. I don't think in history. Because there are thousands and thousands of men and women are out in the streets across the world, weekly and daily sometimes, all over the place, stopping Jews, doing with them mitzvahs, this mitzvah, that mitzvah, whether it's public menorah lightings, whether it's putting on the tefillin, whether it's handing out matzah, or making public seders around the world, or having people across the entire world hear the Megillah, which we're going to be doing on Purim. I mean, these are just absolute, incredible, fantastic mitzvahs. A fantastic operation. A mitzvah drive. The mitzvah drive that the Rebbe drove has never happened since Moshe inspired the Jews to do the mitzvahs at Sinai. So that's my second proof. It's the reason he cares so much is because he literally is Moshe. And the reason, and that's why the Rebbe would always refer to, not himself, but his father-in-law, but he is the continuation, as Moshe. And thirdly is the thing I just told you earlier, instituted, we should learn Rambam. And for whatever reason, it turns out that he instituted and teaches us Torah, inspiring us to study Torah, exactly like Moshe did in the same 339 days like Moshe. So here we have some pretty neat examples of this connection. Now we get back to number 45, because we know that the quality of Moshe's neshama, the uniqueness of Moshe's soul, is that Moshe is the energy of the divine name that equals 45. We find that Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe speaks about himself in the dead, when the Jewish people were complaining that in the desert about the manna, they didn't like it, or this and that, and they were ganging up against Moshe, Moshe says, what do you want from me? Va'anachnu, he says about himself and his brother Aaron, Va'anachnu ma, we are what? Ki salinu aleinu, that you should argue on us. And simply, most people don't pay much attention to that. He means to say, we're just agents of God, what do you want from us? But there's no word in Torah that is meaningless. And there's no word of Torah that doesn't have infinite meaning. That little word tells us everything about who Moshe is. Moshe said about himself, Va'anachnu ma, and we are what? On the simple level, it's the epitome of humility. Humility so much that Moshe has no self at all. He says, I am what? And in that sense, it says that there are many, many humble people. Abraham was very, very humble. And he calls himself dust and ashes. King David was very humble. He calls himself a worm. I'm a worm, I'm not even a person. But notwithstanding and they really meant it, they weren't just saying words. When Abraham said, I am dust and ashes, meant he literally felt that he's dust and ashes. He's literally nothing. King David literally felt that he's a worm. Obviously, when you feel God, when you're in such close proximity to God, and you feel like nothing. However, a worm and dust and ashes is still something. It's very, very insignificant, but it's something. Moshe can't even bring himself to say that I'm a piece of dust, because that's still something. Moshe doesn't even feel himself as even that something, or even a worm. Why? Moshe was so nullified to the all-pervading reality of God, that God is and there's none but God, that he completely disintegrates into God. That does not mean that he doesn't have a command, and that he's not firm, and that he's not strong, and he doesn't have a persona. He has everything. He's unlike any person. But his entire being was not him. He was just a conduit, a complete. In other words, the idea of being a conduit to the fullest, without even one iota of self-consciousness, is Moshe. And that is the level of Ma. Ma means what? Now, the more humble one is, we know Moshe was also the greatest person to ever live. He attained the highest dwelling of God. God never dwelled in a human being until Moshiach, like he dwelled in Moshe. Moshe is the greatest human being, second to Moshiach, who's going to exceed Moshe. But why is Moshe the greatest human being? It's attributed to Moshe being the most humble. Because where can God be? God can be where there is space for him to be. When I say God be, God is everywhere and in everything. When we say God being somewhere, meaning God manifesting and revealing himself somewhere. Being that God is absolute reality, which means that his reality is the only reality. So any consciousness that feels itself even just one iota, that is blocking the full revelation of God in that space. So you can feel God to a certain degree, but you can't really fully, God can't really fully manifest and reveal himself in the same way that God is revealed to himself into this being, if the being feels himself a little bit. If the being, even if it feels itself like dust and ashes, there is still a little bit of a block. So Hashem did not reveal himself in Abraham like he revealed himself in Moshe. That's why Abraham could not bring us the Torah. He merited that he started the process, but the actual communication of the Torah needed someone who's going to be complete self-effacement. Nothing, just pure nothingness. And Moshe, that was only Moses. Because Moshe's consciousness was so only God, so God was fully revealed in him. God was able to reveal himself in Moshe as God is to himself. Because Moshe wasn't blocking. Moshe was not interfering in that at all. That's the quality of Ma. I am what? So we know, and here's an amazing thing, that Kabbalistically, God enters into a system of sphirot and attributes, which are like the operating system through which divine energy flows into the universe. And it flows through a series of 10 sephirot, 10 attributes. Now, these are divine attributes. There's nothing holier than them. But once the attribute starts becoming an attribute, so it starts becoming a little bit of something. The moment it becomes a little bit of something, it's already stepping away from the truth that God is and there's none but him. So how does God manifest in these attributes? How does God flow in those attributes? How does God vest himself into those attributes? And the answer is, it's because of the ingredient of Ma. Because the attributes don't feel themselves. The attributes have the quality. Although the attribute is already a certain design, but the design has no selfish or apartness from God. It's nullified completely to God. It's abnegated to God. So we know that the 10 sfirot are completely abnegated to God. However, their abnegation to God is of the 10 sefirot is in gradations. The lower the sphera it is, it's a little less abnegated. It has a little bit more substance of self. And as a result of that, if it's one of the 10 attributes, it's still unified, but less. It's the first of the 10 sefirot, which is called Chachma. That's the point of contact. That's where God manifests himself. That's where God reveals himself. In the Chachma. Why? Chachma means wisdom. But in Hebrew, the word Chachma comes from the word, can be broken into two words, the Kabbalah say. Koach ma, the power of what? Which means the experience of Chachma is utter nothingness. What does Chachma experience? Chachma is the recipient who receives within itself the crystal clear truth that the infinite one, he is and there's none but him. So Chachma is the epitome of an entity that is open. Chachma is open to the experience. Its entire experience of Chachma is that God is and there's none but him. So the vessels of Chachma are no vessels. And a lot of times it's explained that there isn't even any vessels in Chachma. That Chachma is as if it's like just pure light without vessel. Because it's not like there is even someone there that's experiencing that there's none but God. The someone that's experiencing has lost its somebodyness. So it's hard to really. So if no one is there, so who is Chachma? Chachma is the experience, is the full experience that there is none but him. And that's Chachma. Moshe's soul, and here is the thing, Moshe's soul is rooted in Chachma. And that's why he's the most humble soul. The etymology of the soul, the substance of what is soul, the chemistry of Moshe's soul is from the material of Chachma. And the material of Chachma is that God is and there's none but him. That's why he has no beingness. He has no soul. And precisely because of that, the infinite can reveal himself in him because he has no boundaries. Once you're somebody, then you'll immediately have boundaries. Moshe has no boundaries and no limitations in his soul because of his utter nothingness. Nothingness doesn't have boundaries. So the infinite can manifest in him. And that's literally the point. That's the nest. That's the point of contact where the entire chain of creation connects to God. So Moshe is the deepest point. Moshe's soul is the deepest point where God meets the universe. And it's through Moshe's neshama, which is part of Sfira Sachachma, that God can now reveal himself into all the other attributes, although they have already a little bit more substance. But a lot of Moshe's juice, Chachma juice, spills into all the attributes. So they're not as intrinsically nullified as Chachma is, but they have a mixture of Chachma energy in them so that they are part of the realm of holiness. Holiness has to have Chachma. If there is no Chachma in something, if there is no what we call Koach Ma, if there's no Ma juice in something, if there's no Ma experience in something, it's not holy. It turns into what we call Klipa. Klipa is the unholy. For holiness, which means God is openly revealing himself in something, it's because of Koach Ma, the power of what. Now we can also understand why Geula, redemption, is 45. Because what's redemption? Redemption is when we come out of all restrictions and boundaries. When the entire world is going to be let me put it this way. When the entire world is going to up its consciousness to Moses' consciousness, that's redemption. When we're all going to let go of our fake egos and our fake limitations, and we're all going to become complete conduits for God. Now, I don't know if this is going to happen at the first second of redemption, but this is where we're going. Moshe is basically picking up all of humanity to his level. And that's why it says in the days of Moshiach, God is going to pour his prophecy al kol basar on all flesh. Prophets are not going to be any more a novelty. Everybody's going to be a prophet. Why? Because we're going to let go of the false premise of selfhood. We're all going to tune into the idea that he is and there's none but him. And we're going to function, all of us, and God is going to come forth in all forms and in all expressions. All of existence is simple words. See what's so amazing? Let me put it this way: the 10 attributes, they are one with God. Why are they one with God? Because they have a lot of chachma in them. Which one is the ultimately one with God? The first of those attributes, the power of wisdom. It's completely one with God. But it's very, very, very sublime. Very sublime. What was unique about Moshe? What was unique about Moshe is that very consciousness of chachma came down and it clothed itself in a physical body. That a human being who is existing inside a physical body of flesh and blood, notwithstanding the coarseness of the material world, he still lived in the consciousness. In other words, his physical body didn't in anywhere coarsen his consciousness. So the same dwelling that God was dwelling, it dwells in the deepest, in the most spiritual, sublime worlds. You can actually visit a human being, a physical human being. If you saw Moses, you were able to see a physical human being walking here on earth who has no beingness, no sense of self. He's a complete conduit for God, speaking through him, seeing through him, hearing through him, thinking through him, understanding through him. Everything was coming through Moses all the way to his physical body. It was completely in a state of oneness with God. What's Moshiach? Moshiach is when the entire physical world will be on the same spiritual level as the world of Atzilus, as the world of emanation, as the spiritual world up there that is unified with God. Our material physical world will be on that level of unification. And then we will all be in the consciousness of 45. And God will manifest himself in our bodies and in the physical world in the same way like he manifests in Sfirat HaChachma, in the attribute of wisdom. When everybody and everything in the world will be in Moshe Rabbeinu's consciousness. And Moshe will be higher and higher and higher and higher. It won't remove the levels. It will just lift everything up to levels that we don't even understand. And that's redemption, because we're not stuck anymore in infinitude in time and space. We're above it all, because we're unified with the true being that's above it all. Okay. Now, the question is, how does the entire world now that state of existence is the only state in which we can truly call a human being Adam. You know, humans have many names. There are 4 names to the human species. One of them is Enosh, like from the word Anoshim. The other one is Ish. The other one is Gever, like Givarim. And the final one is called Adam. Now, these are not, why does a human species have 4 different ways of referring to it? Because each one expresses another state of the human condition. The highest level of the human condition is the state of perfect unification with God. In other words, the human being becomes a divine conduit. And only then are we called the real name Adam. Why? Because Adam means, well, on the one hand, it means Adama, which means earth. But that seems to be an inferior name. The real reason for Adam is because it stands for Adamel Elyon. I am compared to the one above. How can a human being be compared to the one above? Do we find any human being compared to God? Well, Moshe is. Where do we find a comparison of Moshe to God? It says in the verse, by the splitting of the sea, Vayaminu Bashem, they believed in God, Ubemoshe Avdo, and in Moshe his servant. And over here, by the Torah saying they believed in God and in Moshe his servant, it's putting Moshe equal to God. How can Moshe, who's a human being, therefore finite and limited, Moshe was pretty tall, but only so tall and only so he's human, and he has flesh and blood, and God is the creator of the universe and infinitely beyond the universe. And how can you compare? The secret is in one word: Moshe Avdo, Moshe his servant. The real meaning of servant over here means totally abnegated to God. Since Moshe was abnegated to God, Moshe doesn't have, as we mentioned earlier, he's not something for himself. As we said earlier, he's just a God passing through him. Since there is no separation there, yes, Moshe and God could be said in comparison one to the other. That's the meaning of Adamel Elyon. The human below will be compared to the supernal human. God also, when God descends into the 10 Sephirot, God is called human. You know, in Ezekiel, when he had the vision, it says over there that he saw the throne, and on the throne there was sitting someone in the image of God. Sorry. I'm just on the throne. He saw the image of a man. Who's that man? It's God. God is a man. Yeah. When God flows into the divine attributes, which are in a human form, spiritual human form, intelligence, emotions, it's this psychological structure of the human. And Moses down here, and Adam, the meaning of Adam means that the physical human being down here is compared to the one above. That means the same godly flow that flows in the divine attributes above can flow in the human being down here below. Who's that human being who reached that level? Who can be on par with the Sfirot of Atzilus, have the same unification with God? Moses. Only Moses. Because as we said earlier, the secret is not because of how great he is, not because he's so smart and he's so intelligent and he's so good and he's so kind and it's not because of what he is, it's because of what he's not. Because he has no self and he's utterly surrendered and nullified without even one tiny bit of self-consciousness, it's precisely because of that God can fully manifest and come through him. And here's the secret. Adam, the numeric value of Adam is 45. 45. So what do you see from here? The secret of being Adam is to be to be 45. Which means to be what? To be 45. When God created Adam, who's the first person who was called Adam? Adam. But Adam only deserved that name until he sinned. God created the human being below, Adam and Eve, with the intention that they should be on this level of Moshe. On this level of complete unification with God, God would be flowing through them because they have no sense of separateness. But when they sinned and they fell, They kind of lost that. And until Moshe didn't come, Jacob, Yaakov was kind of already hitting those levels. But primarily it was Moshe. Yaakov and Moshe really on the same level, it says. Yaakov is external and Moses internal. It says Yaakov looked like Adam. That means Yaakov was the first human being who reached the level to make his image be the image of God. Adam el Elyon. And of course, the pnimius of that, the innermost of that is Moshe. Because Adam is 45. So let's understand what the notion of 45 is. 45 represents the number 45, which spells the word Aleph Daled Mem, equals 45. It's the purification of consciousness to the level, to the state that you're so tuned in to God's reality, to the point that you feel with such a sharp, vivid way that God is and there's nothing but Him, and therefore your consciousness ceases to be yourself, but rather is now included as just part of Hashem's consciousness. That is Adam. And then God is manifesting in you. God is fully manifesting in the human being. That's called being a real mensch. That's being. Less than that is not the high level of Adam. A person doesn't mean you're not human. Don't have the Adam quality of human. You can be Gever. Gever is also human. But the unique quality of being godlike, that's the state of Bittul. Now until Moshiach is fully revealed, until we're going to have the third temple, and until God is going to increase the consciousness of God in this world a billionfold, like it's going to happen very soon, we can't really attain this. Regular people. However, we could. Not in our conscious, but in our actions. How does that work? And here's the secret. How is the entire world going to catch up with Moses? Today we had one human being, Moshe. And what does Rambam say about Moshe? I said earlier, what did Rambam say about Moshe? Rambam says about Moshe, Mifchar Minanush, he is the chosen of the human race. Now we understand why. Because he reaches that level where God can manifest in him. And that's the chosen of the human race. That's what a human is supposed to be. Human is supposed to be the physical vessel, the physical body for God. I'm going to say something very, very strong. Every human being, in essence, is supposed to be the physical manifestation of God in this world. But for that, we can't have a self. But that doesn't mean people get scared of this. Oh, I'm going to lose myself. You're not losing yourself. You're being the truest self of who you really are. God really is everything. We're just living in a la-la imagination that we are something. Once we get rid of that drunkenness and we sober up and we get to see reality for what it is, then we all are conduits, and His presence He is life, and He is dwelling inside all of us, and He's expressing Himself into our personality. The personality is good. We're not going to become the same. The personality of each human being is God having a good time, being every kind of possible type of person He can be. But the problem when it becomes is when we start sticking in our own wants and desires because we separate from Him. That's the disconnect. But when we are all Him being this and being that, that's the beauty of it. Now, how is mankind all going to catch up with Moses? For that, God gave the Torah to the world. And Torah itself is also called Adam. Zos HaTorah Adam. So the Torah is a spiritual man. Now, how do you know that the Torah is called Adam? The power of the Torah is the power of the Torah is the power of this quality. Torah comes to manifest 45 energy in the world. Why? Let's understand. It's just this is so understandable. How does it work? So let's first see. Adam, as we said earlier, is the human structure. An animal is not possible to have such consciousness. It's only the human being that has that quality of ma. That's why it's called human. Now, the human body, the human structure, is made up of 248 limbs. 248 limbs or organs. And then there are 365 arteries or blood vessels in a human being. Thus is what the sages have taught us. 365 blood vessels, 248 organs. That's the Adam. That's the outer shell of the human being. That's the physical human being. Well, let's go to the Torah, and we see the Torah is exactly that structure. There are 248 positive commandments, and there are 365 prohibitive commandments in the Torah. So the Torah is a big, ginormous human being. I'm sorry, I got like a bad stiff neck over here. So, talk about the physical body needing to be aligned with God. I probably have a problem in the neck. Got to do some repentance over here. Clear the neck. It says all the problems begin in the neck because that's where the exile starts. Maybe that's what I'm trying to get out of the exile over here. Okay. So, what was I saying? So the Torah is 365 prohibitions, 248 positive commandments, and that is the human structure. What does that mean? What that means is as follows. Every single one of these commandments, let's take the positive commandments. So, let's say there is a mitzvah to give charity, which is the mitzvah of tzedakah. That's God's right hand. That means like this. The infinite being dwells just like, let's take in our own bodies. Our soul is spiritual, dwells inside our hand, our limbs, in our bodies. Our soul, my soul, your soul. The human hand is a vessel for the human soul, and our soul gets its way, has its fulfillment through its limbs. When the limbs comply with the soul's desires, the soul is expressing itself in those limbs, and the limbs are cut out. The limbs are cut out to facilitate the soul and the soul's desires. So when God wants to dwell in the concept of a hand, what does God want to do with his hand? He wants to do kindness. So the mitzvah of tzedakah, the concept, the mitzvah of tzedakah, is God's kindness flowing through God's hand. Now, in Atzilus, in the world of emanation, God is constantly doing kindness with the world. He's giving nonstop charity. God's support and giving life to the worlds, he's giving it. Kindness is God's right hand. So that's God, that's the Ein Sof, it's the infinite one, flowing into the body. What's the body? The body is the image of kindness, the energy of kindness, but it's spiritual. Comes the Torah, and the Torah tells you there is a mitzvah for you to give charity. So when I and any one of us is actually taking a dollar bill and giving it into a tzedakah box, or giving it to someone poor on the street, what you're really doing is now you're allowing God to flow through your arm. So the the divine hand, God's right arm, is now manifesting in your physical right hand through the mitzvah of Torah. The mitzvah in the Torah that tells us that God wants us to give charity. When you're making, so when our hand follows the mitzvah of the Torah, and we're doing, so it's as if, it's not as if, it really is happening. But first let's start off as, and then we'll take away the as in a moment. So first we'll start, it's as if God is now doing executing his infinite kindness through your hand. Now, if I am doing the mitzvah and I'm not thinking about my kindness, but I'm doing the mitzvah because God said so. So I'm allowing my hand right now to react to God's kindness, because I'm not motivated to do the kindness because, and even if we are, let's say I feel tremendous compassion for this person who is in a miserable state and needs help, and I'm reaching out because I feel bad and I feel that. However, I stop for a moment. I don't want to stop because the person needs help. You want to do it really quick. But while you're doing it, you're thinking, well, I'm doing this because God commanded me to do so. So what you're basically allowing your hand now to be moved. Your hand is not being moved by you. Your hand is now being moved by God. So it's God's soul, who's the Ein Sof, is flowing through the divine hand. But that the divine hand of kindness is in the higher worlds. How does God have a hand in this world? Guess what? He comes through our human hands when we are doing writing tzedakah. So now my physical hand is God's hand. It's not mine. However, the key to this is that instead of using this hand right now to do something selfish for myself, I am now letting go of myself and letting God come through in my hand. So my hand is now, the key to it is Ma 45. Ma means I don't exist right now. It's only your will, God. So you've taken over my hand. Or rather, we've merged me as a human with you, God. I am being a divine being right now because I'm executing a divine will right now. Now, the more I can be selfless in this action, the more I can do the action because God said so. That's the purity of a mitzvah. Mitzvahs always have to be done because God said so, not because of the reasons, even the Kabbalistic reasons. We're supposed to set that all aside. And when you're doing the mitzvah of giving charity, your hand is actually God's hand. So for a moment, you have a little piece of Moshe. Moshe lived that way every second. His consciousness was as pure as it gets. Our consciousness is convoluted. Our consciousness is distorted. But the moment you do a mitzvah, you're setting everything aside and you're allowing Moshe consciousness into your hand. You're doing the mitzvah exactly like Moshe told you to do it, which is where God said to do it because Moshe has no opinion of his own. So basically your hand is now like an extension of God's hand. You're exactly like Moshe. Now, if we do that with all 613 commandments, and the more we do that every minute of our life, because every minute of our life there is a mitzvah to do, there's always something to, because every mitzvah, it's a mitzvah to study Torah. Every second and every opportunity, there's so many mitzvot, so many, and our conduct becomes aligned with God's will, then God fully manifests in each and every one of us. So we might not be in the purity of consciousness like Moshe, but the behavior equals what Moshe would be doing with his hands and feet. So, and by implementing the Torah that Moshe gave us, which is the Torah of Ma. What's Moshe's consciousness? Ma. And Moshe, why was Moshe the one that brought us the Torah? Because the Torah is the Torah of Ma, of 45. The Torah enables, the Torah is the structure of God's will being manifest in vessels. Which vessels? The human vessel. So when I'm using my life, my energy, my hands, feet, limbs, organs, and I'm doing my own business, then I'm me. What am I? A small little nobody. Here today, gone tomorrow. But if every time we synchronize ourselves with the will of God and with the Torah, so now God is now fully manifesting in each and every one of us, we are now in the state of Ma, implementing the Torah, implementing the nothingness. But in that nothingness, we are everything, because then God is manifesting in that So we become Ma and we become Adam. So which would mean like this. Each and every one of us, depending on how much of the Torah we can actualize, of the conduct of the Torah, of the mitzvot, we can actualize in our body, the more Adam we become, the more man we become. Adam, 45. 45, manifestation of God in this world. Now we'll stop for one moment. Hear this. This Adam, 45, in addition to it being the human condition that is Adam Ela Elyon, that is compared to the one above, is also God's name. Because God's name, which is the highest name of God, what's the highest name of God? Yud Kei Vav Kei. Tetragrammaton. The deepest. It's the letters that express God more than any other name. God is manifest in these letters. Yud Kei Vav Kei equals 26. Yud is 10, the two Heys are 5, is another 20, and Vav is 6. However, the Kabbalists teach us that inside the Yud and inside the Hey and inside the Vav and inside the Hey are other hidden letters. In a Yud are two hidden letters, a Vav and a Dalet, because when you spell the word Yud, you can hear a Dalet there, Yud. The D sound is the D sound, is the Dalet. Hey has also hidden letters. Vav has hidden letters. Hey. Yud Kei Vav Kei has hidden letters inside of them. Those hidden letters equal, if you add them together, they equal 45. How? The Yud is Yud Vav Daled. Yud is 10, Vav is 6, Daled is 4, together is 20. Hey is Hey Aleph, is 6. Vav is Vav Aleph Vav. So 6 plus 20 is 26. Vav Aleph Vav is 13, is 39. Hey is again a Hey and an Aleph, is again 6. Equals 45. So this is incredible. Yud Kei Vav Kei is 45. That means what's the Torah? The entire Torah is really, if we strip away the externalities, imagine that. If we took away everything comes in vessels, in containers, so we don't always see the essence. If we could take a look, if we could take an X-ray and really get to the essence of what the Torah is nothing other than Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is God being man. What is Yud Kei Vav Kei? God being man. God vesting himself in the vessels. And those vessels are totally one with him. That's the point. When the vessels are totally one, when the soul is vested in the body, that's a human. That's Adam. When the supernal soul, which is the infinite light of God, the infinite being of God, vests himself in the supernal vessels, all of the vessels together, because we know Yud is Chachma, Hey is Bina, Vav is the 6 emotions, Hey is Malchut. So the entire sum totality of all 10 Sefirot as a vessel, as a container for God, that is, when God is vested in them, then he's called Yud Kei Vav Kei. When God is above that, he doesn't have a name. A name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, is when he vests himself in the attributes, but the attributes being in a state of total dissolving into him. Like when our bodies dissolve to our soul. When is a healthy body a healthy body? When a body disconnects with the soul. When you want to move your foot and your foot is not moving. When you want to move your fingers and your fingers are not complying, the fingers are not in the mood today. That means you got to see a doctor. That's not a healthy person. A healthy body is a body that's completely nullified and surrendered and one with the human soul that's inside of us. So the idea of Adam, the idea of Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is gematria 45, which is the same numeric value as Adam, which is the same numeric value of Geula, of redemption, is when there is a perfect synchronization between the Ein Sof and the attributes. And those very attributes, those 10 attributes above, formulates themselves in the Torah. What's the Torah? The Torah is the entire structure of God's limbs. Remember we said earlier, 248, 365, positive mitzvahs, prohibitive mitzvahs. Those are God's limbs and God's blood vessels. When we align our physical bodies with those 613 commandments, 248 and 365, the supernal man becomes, the human, physical human being down here becomes a Torah body, which means every single one of us is Yud Kei Vav Kei. This is wild. And that's why it says that when the product is done, when Moshiach comes, when we finish rectifying the body, it says the name of the Jewish people are going to be Havaya. That's the end story. We will be him. And what's that? 45. And that's redemption. Geula 45. Now, we're almost there. In order to have this body, this structure, just like a human body is one unit in which you need to have all components together. You can't just have fingers on their own or calves on their own or a spine on its own. The entire structure has to come together as one human body. So too, it's one thing when you have different parts of the Torah. The Torah was scattered. Think about it. Moshe brought us the Torah, but for many, many years, for 2,000 years, the Torah was kind of scattered. There was hardly any people who knew the entire Torah. A few great rabbis knew it, but there wasn't one book that you can capture the entire 240. All the details of the 248 commandments and all the details of the 365 prohibitions in one solid, singular book that is learnable by every person. Till Moses ben Maimon comes, Moshe ben Maimon, the holy Rambam, and was imbued by a divine spirit. And his name is Moshe. That's not by accident, because he's got the same quality of Moshe. It wouldn't surprise me that he too was an incarnation of Moshe. And he takes all of the mitzvot and creates one structure. He gives you the full man in his book, the supernal man, in a practical form of how it's implemented, how the supernal man is implemented in this world. The book of Mishnah Torah. The 45, the power of Ma, brought down structure in this world. Now, let's go for a second to the human body. We spoke that the human body has 365 arteries, 248 limbs. But that's external. That's the external structure. What's the internal? Inside the 248 limbs and 365 blood vessels runs the juice of life. And what's the juice of life? That's the blood. The blood is the internal. Why am I saying the blood is different than the limbs? Because the limbs, each limb is separate. Every organ, every limb, every artery, it's its own arteries, not the same arteries. The arteries of the foot are not. First of all, the limbs are definitely different. The organs and limbs are different. But even the arteries, it's not the same artery. The artery of the feet are different. I know sometimes they'll take from one part and put in the other, but that's a whole situation. But generally, the arteries of each part of the body is its own thing. The one entity in the body that is equal everywhere is the blood. The blood circulates. It goes around the body, the blood circulation. Same blood. So the blood is the pnimiyut, the inside of it. Pnimiyus Adam, the innermost of the human, is the blood. Now, let's take it a step deeper. Is the blood really, really, really the life of the person? Yeah, without blood, you can't live. And if you lose too much blood, God forbid, you lose the real life of the person is not the blood, but the spiritual energy that goes into the blood. In other words, the blood is just a physical container, so to speak, that captures something that is utterly spiritual. How do we know that? The verse keeps on saying in the Torah, Ki hadam hu hanefesh, that the blood is the soul. But then it says, does that mean the blood is the soul? The soul is spirit. There's a verse that says it says stronger. Ki nefesh habasar b'damhu. The soul of the flesh, the soul of the body is in the blood. A living being means that spirit, something that's utterly spiritual, somehow attaches itself to the blood, and through the blood, we're alive. That's why the blood is crucial to life. So if you look at the human being, it's really three layers. There's the external, he is the external human, which are the vessels, the containers. Inside the containers is a uniform entity, which is the blood, which is a uniform fluid that flows throughout the entire body. And inside that is a singular soul, which is life itself. Let's now for a moment look at the Torah. Hey, wait, and it's hinted to in the word Adam. Because in the word Adam you have Aleph, Dam. Dam is what? Dam is the blood. What's the Aleph? Aleph is the soul. Aleph is what is the singular being. It's referring to the divine energy, the soul. The soul, the Aleph, goes into the Dam, into the blood. And the blood enlivens the human. So now let's take this into the Torah itself. The act of a mitzvah is one of God's limbs, and when we do a mitzvah, our limbs converge with God's limbs. But every mitzvah, just like the limbs, each limb is in its particular place, and you can't mix one with the other. So too, every mitzvah has its particular time. We blow a shofar on Rosh Hashanah. We eat matzah on Passover. You cannot eat matzah on Rosh Hashanah. I mean, you can eat matzah, but it doesn't have any spiritual significance. You can blow a shofar from today till tomorrow, Passover by night. It's meaningless. Shofar must be blown on Rosh Hashanah. Matzah must be eaten on Passover. Resting has to happen on Shabbos, not on Monday, and so on and so forth. Each mitzvah has its time, its particular place. However, you know what's interesting? Torah study, you can study anytime. Not only that, you can study the laws of any part of Torah at any time of the year, and it's considered holy and godly, and you make your connection with God. That means that now you can learn the laws of Yom Kippur, even though it's completely, and it's still considered on Purim. You can learn the laws of Hanukkah, and it's 100% valid. You can learn the laws of sacrifices in the temple, and it's considered holy and godly. But if you did a sacrifice outside in Los Angeles, it's meaningless. But if you learned the laws of it, it's holy and godly as... Why is that? Because there's two things. There is observance, and there is the study of the observance. The Torah is the blood. The observance itself is the limbs. And just like the life of the limbs is the blood, the life of observance is Torah study. And just like the blood is equal everywhere, and it's not divided, so too the Torah is not divisible. However, but listen to this. Notwithstanding the greatness of the blood is only special if it's oxygenated blood and if there is a soul flowing in the blood. Once God forbid a person died and the soul left the body, the blood is there. Even if they can keep the blood circulating in a body, it's meaningless. There has to be soul in the blood, life in the blood. The Aleph has to connect to the Mem Dalet. What does that mean? That means that Torah itself, just the wisdom of the Torah, the knowledge of the Torah, the laws of the Torah, that's the blood. Again, the limbs are the observance itself. The Torah is the blood that runs in the observance. But it needs to have God inside of it. The supernal man has to. That's the 45th versus the 44. 44 is the vessels, the limbs, the blood. That's all 44. 45, since 45 is the level of nullification, nothingness, the complete humility to the deepest point, so that God can enter. So 45 represents that state. In the 45th, that's where you can capture the Ein Sof. And then then it's not just blood, it's blood pulsating with life. And in our case, it's the life of who? Of God himself, of the infinite. God in the Torah. You can have Torah without God. God forbid. When God is in the Torah, and that's why the Torah could not have been given by any other scholar. No one can give us the Torah. Because no human being ever attained that purity of consciousness. No one ever attained such level of absolute humility, of non-beingness, only Moshe. Moshe was that point of contact where the 45, so to speak, because he was 45, in him, God can, the soul of the Torah, which is the infinite, which is God himself, can manifest. And through Moshe, it enters the bloodstream. It enters the Torah. That's why it says, Moshe kibel Torah min Sinai. Moshe receives the Torah. When he says that he receives the Torah, he receives the essence of the Torah, the spiritual infinity of the Torah. It goes through his soul. And then when he teaches Torah, it's a living Torah with life. And then when we study the Torah, we have the blood. And then when we do the observances, we have the limb. And then each and every one of us become that structure through which God himself can manifest in every single one. And we all become the Adom Elyon, the supernal man. Eventually, we are all Yud Kei Vav Kei, the tetragrammaton. And we're all living in a state of Geula, which is 45. It's all connected. So what Moshe captured at Sinai, Maimonides, who was also Moshe, had to capture that same thing in his book. Now, obviously, once Moshe captured it, it was there already. But still, and where do we see that Rambam captured it? It's my own thought. The fact that Rambam has 1,000 chapters. 1,000 is the word Elef. Elef in Hebrew is Elef is Aleph. Aleph, the letter Aleph is Elef. In the 1,000 chapters of Rambam, the fact that God, by divine providence, made that the Rambam, I don't think Rambam said, I'm going to make 1,000 chapters. Rambam said, I'm going to take as many chapters as I need to cover the entire Torah. The fact that Rambam concluded with 1,000 chapters, which the 1,000 is the word Elef. And if you rearrange, and it's interesting, and Elef is Aleph. It's the Aleph Dam. So I would say like this. Let me put it in these like kind of, if the Rambam would have 999 chapters in his book, it would be dam, it would be blood. It would be the blood of the entire Torah. The fact that he's got 1,000 chapters, that Aleph, is that his book carries the life, it's not just blood, it's blood with life of the Ein Sof. It's God himself dwelling in the book of the Rambam. That's why Moshe had to come visit him at the end of his book, to imbue the Rambam, so to speak, with that 1,000th chapter. It's interesting that the word Aleph is also, if you rearrange it another way, it comes the word Pele. Pele means wonder. Because the spiritual, that's a wonder. What is that? We can't grasp it. It's Ein Sof, it's infinite. The other parts of Torah, the logic of Torah, the ideas of Torah, the structure, we can grasp. But the unknowable of Torah, the Ein Sof of Torah, that's the thousands. That's the 45 over the 44. Comes the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And right before Moshiach comes, now let's understand one more secret about Adam. Secret about Adam is, it says that Adam is also the acronym of Adam, David, Moshiach. So, which means that this product called the Adam the human being to be completely synchronized with God, goes through a development throughout all of history. It begins with Adam. Another major state is King David. For some reason, we don't count Moshe over here. And then from David, we culminates in Moshiach. Moshiach is the final conclusion of this Adam being. So we would understand that, and that's why what's Moshiach? Moshiach comes to bring the entire world to Torah observance. His main job, Rambam says, is that he has to get the Jewish people to keep the Torah. And automatically through that, he fixes the entire world. Because once God dwells in the world, everything synchronizes. Everything clicks. It's mainly, primarily has to involve the Jewish people keeping mitzvot and keeping Torah. So one of the things Moshiach is going to do is major campaigns to get Jews to keep mitzvot and to bring observance for the entirety of the Jewish people. So the Rebbe, you saw in his 40 years, sent his emissaries throughout the entire world to get Jews from the four corners from the entire world to keep mitzvot. But that's the outer limbs. That's the outer limbs. The Rebbe was busy structuring the limbs, the organs. Then, "35 years into the Rebbe's work, getting close to the end of the 40, like Moshe spent 40 years with the Jewish people, the Rebbe said, okay, now we gotta start bringing in the blood arteries. Now these limbs we need to plug in the arteries. We need to put in where the blood will flow. So the Rebbe instituted that we should study Rambam. The Rambam is, we said, Maimonides has the Torah of all the mitzvot. So that's like putting in the veins, putting in the structure, pumping the blood. But we understand something. This is a cosmic tikkun. This is what I'm saying. It's a cosmic tikkun. When the Rebbe said all the Jewish people should start learning Rambam, what the Rebbe was instituting, the way I understand it, is that we should start introducing a blood, and all of us together, because it has to be like the circulation of the blood. It has to run through all of us. We'll all learn Rambam. We'll all learn the entire, it's part of the tikkun of the Geula. But we did it for 44 years. So basically what I'm suggesting is that the 44 years that we studied until now was more the blood, not yet the imbuing of that aleph. But now that we start the 45th cycle, it's when the soul is entering into it. That was my whole class. I could have said the whole thing in one line. This is it. Is that now at the 45th, now is when the Ma is coming in. Now is where the Ein Sof is coming in. We'd finished all the tikkunim. We finished all that stuff. The blood, the outer structure we have, the limbs we have. Then we have the blood circle. The blood has been, by learning the laws, now we have to feel God in the laws. That's the Geula. I think what's really cool, the chiddush that I'm going to say tonight that I didn't say, and I gave over this idea in many places that I spoke last week, but the chiddush that we're going to add tonight is that this year has another quality which connects to this whole idea. This year is 33 years since the Rebbe spoke to us last. In 1992 was the last, and then the Rebbe had a stroke. 27th day of the month of Adar. But now it's 33 years. The Rebbe having the stroke then was part of the concealment, part of some kind of a cosmic concealment right before the redemption. The 33 of this year coincides with number 45. How do we know this? How do I know this? A few years ago, there was a terrible, terrible tragedy that shook the Jewish world to the core. It was on the 33rd day of the Omer in Israel, Lag BaOmer 33, when there was great festivities taking place by Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who, by the way, has the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, the main teacher of the great Kabbalist Rabbi Shimon. Fires are made in Israel all over, and hundreds of thousands of Jews come to dance. And during that event, there was a horrible collapse. There was a mismanagement of the crowds for whatever reason, and there was a bottleneck, and people, and sadly, a lot of people died. It was very shocking. The number of those holy souls who passed away were 45. It was on the 33rd day of the Omer. So I did a lot of research on these numbers because I was very perturbed by it. And like, what could this mean? What's going on? And at that time, I discovered a very interesting thing. That 33 is really the 33 is a very powerful number. 33 is a number associated with the sweetening of all judgments. That's why I feel this year is so significant, because there was a very great judgment in the concealment of the Rebbe. Moshiach was revealed already. And then there was a great judgment, because it says that Moshiach will be revealed, will be concealed. The concealing of Moshiach is a very, very great, it's like an Esther moment. It's a tremendous concealment, a tremendous darkness, where the klipot become very strong. It's the last fight. It's the last push of the klipos. It's a very dark time. But after 33 days, the judgments lighten up already. Like we find in the time of Sfirat Omer, the counting of the Omer is also a time of judgments between Pesach and Shavuot. And on the 33rd day, everything becomes sweetened. On Lag BaOmer, there's no more judgments. We feel great joy in this. What's the idea? Because 33, the number 33 is in essence the number 3. It's 3 plus 3 to the 10s. It's 33. 3 is the power of number 3 is really the power of 45. Why? What makes 40? This is all from the Arizal. What makes 45? What's the main letter inside the Yud Kei Vav Kei? We said before, the tetragrammaton equals 45. If you use the hidden letters, but which letter does it have to be filled with? So we know that the tetragrammaton can be filled with different letters, but the one we are using to get 45 is to fill it with alephs. How many alephs do we have in the Yud Kei Vav Kei? The Hey has an aleph, the Vav has an aleph, and the Hey has an aleph. The Yud doesn't have an aleph. So there's 3 alephs. The power of number 45, the Arizal says, is in the 3 alephs, which make up 3. Because the Hey has an aleph. Aleph, aleph, aleph is 3. 1, 1, and 1, the 3 alephs. That's why we know that the main name of 45, of Yud Kei Vav Kei, normally from 45, is in the 3rd sphere in Tiferes. Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes. Tiferes is 45. The energy of Tiferet. Tiferet is harmony, which is number 3. So this year being the 33rd year since the concealment, there's something that started in 1992. I don't know what, but something started then. This year being the 33rd year since then, you also found that in the first stage of the release of the hostages, I spoke about this a few weeks ago, they made up to release 33, which is interesting. You see that there's a sweetening of extreme judgments have to do with number 33. But the real power of the sweetening of the judgments is the revelation of the Gilui of Shame memhe, the shame of 45. Why it had to, God forbid, happen, and back then that it happened in a way that there was 45 holy souls that passed away at that very holy moment, like souls being elevated on the altar. I don't know. I don't know the mystical secrets of why this happened, but I know there is a connection. That's the thing. There was definitely, without a question, a connection between that passing away of these tzaddikim who passed away at the Mount Miran on the holiest day. If you look at the faces of them, and you hear the stories, they were all literally handpicked by God, like incredible, great, holy souls. There was some kind of elevation that was involved with drawing down the energies of 45 on the 33rd day of the Omer. So I'm thinking now that we're starting the 45th round of Rambam on the 33rd year. It's got to mean that now is like the stage is set. The stage is set for the hisgalos of the supernal man of Adam, of Moshiach Tzidkenu, who is the full manifestation of Adam. What can we do about it? We can learn Maimonides. We can learn Rambam. But uniqueness about learning it this time, I feel personally, is while other times I can learn it like half asleep, just mumbling words. When you're just mumbling words, you're saying the vessels. It's not good enough. You have to have the aleph. You have to learn it with life this time. Feel the aleph. Feel the 45. Feel the energy pulsating in it. Feel God in the Rambam. That's the idea. That's the novelty of this learning of Rambam. So, Bezrat Hashem, may everybody. Oh, wait. Now we're going to connect it to Purim. This is great. We said earlier that the Jewish people, that Moses was the one who brought us the Torah, because Moshe was at the epitome of of selflessness. When Moshe reached the epitome of selflessness, that's why he was. When you're not, you can capture this, the Ein Sof. Ein Sof can manifest in the vessels when the vessels are not in any way separated from the light by being something. Now, how were the Jewish people at the time of Sinai? Moses was in that state. Well, Moshe was their leader, so Moshe lifted them up to that place. Where do we see that the Jewish people were lifted into that state of into the energy of 45? You found that by the giving of the Torah, for a few minutes, we all got along with each other. There was no differences. Everybody stood in an amazing state of unity. On the first day of the month of Sivan, when we came to the place, everybody was ke'ish echad b'lev. We all one. When we all feel each other as something, a bunch of some things can't get along with each other. We automatically clash. I have my opinion. I think it has to be my way. You have your way. Everybody's banging at each other. When we reach humility, and the deepest humility causes the unity and the harmony. So we see that the Jewish people were in a state of this complete surrender to God, and only through that they were able to receive the Torah. But since at Sinai, it was mainly because Moshe lifted them up to that place. It wasn't that they were really there. That's why it says that their acceptance of the Torah really didn't really click. It didn't really take hold of them. It was like separated from them. It says it took until the miracle of Purim, till the story of Purim, which is 1,000 years later, that the Jews finally accepted, fully received the Torah. Why? Because at the story of Purim, the Jewish people were faced with the decision. They had a threat looming over them, as the Alter Rebbe says, for an entire year. Haman wanted to kill them out. So even though Haman was killed pretty fast at the beginning, but Achashverosh had not been able to take back his letters that he sent out with permission to kill all the Jews. And looking based on what we see now, that when our current Achashverosh is saying that he's going to he's going to defund all the colleges that allow anti-Semitic protests, and close to, not too far from coming to pogroms, but when you allow such anti-Semitism, who knows? And there were Jews that were attacked on college campuses. When he now, the current Achashverosh, says, I'm going to defund them, there are plenty of people that come to the rescue. Like they wanted to deport the guy who was doing all today's news. They wanted to deport him and revoke his visa, and the judge stopped it, because the judge feels that we should have some anti-Semite rabble rousers staying in America, because God forbid if we take away all those who will arouse the masses against the Jewish people. It's amazing. In any case, well, I'm just giving an example that in that time it was exactly like that. But even much worse is that there was still a great danger hovering over the Jewish people for an entire year. That if the day will come that Achashverosh had declared that Jewish blood is now free for all, anybody can kill them, that there would be massive pogroms and Jews would be killed everywhere. And Jews had a choice. If they would stop identifying as Jews, if they would officially melt into the rest of society, they would be safe. It wasn't like Hitler, who basically looked at your ancestry and wanted to know if you were once Jewish, and he murdered those as well. At that time, the anti-Semitism wasn't that deep, but Jews who did look like Jews and appeared like Jews and acted like Jews would be killed. The Jewish people had to think about this for an entire year, and yet no Jews, every single one of the Jewish people remained loyal to their Jewishness. It's an incredible moment. And that's an incredible moment of self-sacrifice. That sacrifice, and also the unity that they felt with each other, brought them into this deepest state of self-transcendence. That's the idea, self-transcendence. Nullification to God. As a result of that, they reached the epitome of Ma. And when they reach the epitome of Ma, the Torah can fully click. Until then, the Torah was sitting on them, but it didn't click. Sometimes when you try to put two things together and it just doesn't click, you feel like this. It has to snap. It has to snap. The Torah did not snap into place until 1,000 years later, when it finally snapped. It took hold. It became part of us. The sages say the words, but hear these words. On the words Kimu v'kiblu ha-Yehudim, the Jewish, in the Megillah it says Kimu, they established, v'kiblu, and they received, that Yehudim, the Jewish people. The sages say these words, Kimu ma shekiblu kvar. They just now substantiated, or in my words I used earlier, it snapped, it clicked that which they accepted earlier. But here the words the sages say, Kimu ma shekiblu kvar. They received some bit of ma, but it didn't. The ma element, the 45th element, the infinity of the Torah never really settled in them, because they didn't really have a true, complete Moshe experience until the story of Purim. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, and the Megillah it also says, in the reading of Ma Higia Aleim. Simply, it means what happened to them. The deeper meaning, what caught up with them. Let's say that again. Ma Higia Aleim. What? The power of what? The power of being what? The power of being completely abnegated to God. Higia Aleim finally caught up with them. They finally got with the program. What's the program? The program of being what? So the what Moshe caught up with the Jewish people 1,000 years after Moshe. So Purim is an incredible state of time of this what. That's why we get a little tipsy. It's a mitzvah on Purim to get intoxicated. We get out of our self-consciousness. The point of getting intoxicating of Purim is not to be crazy, not to be silly. The point is to go into a very deep place where we get out of our what we call it, what is the word that people the of self-consciousness, to be able to be one with God and one with the Torah and one with each other, and that's Purim. So may Hashem bless us all that this Purim should be the great miracle, the greatest of all miracles. We're so there, we're so ready. Let the Ma fully reveal itself in us. The ultimate Ma is Moshiach, Adam David Moshiach. Let's take upon ourselves to love each other, care about each other, and learn the Rambam together. To seek and yearn for the Ma. Because the Ma is really, really, really accessible now and reachable. L'chaim, everyone. A very happy Purim. And let us see the Ma, which is equal Geula. Let us see the Geula now.